Hey, Silent Pages fam. We're starting a new love journey. Tell us where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe. Now stay with us. The story begins. The gala hall shimmered under crystal chandeliers, each ray of light bouncing off the polished marble floor. Guests in evening gowns and tailored suits murmured softly, their conversations forming a gentle buzz that filled the grand space. Elena adjusted the strap of her dress, feeling slightly out of place among the affluent crowd. She had been invited not for her social standing, but for her journalistic eye, a keen reporter known for uncovering truths, not for mingling in opulent circles. Still, curiosity pulled her here. Across the room, a tall man caught her attention. His presence was magnetic, almost unnervingly so. Peter had the kind of aura that demanded attention without speaking, a perfect blend of elegance, control, and restraint. He smiled faintly at someone across the room, and in that moment, Elena's pulse quickened. Something about the way he held himself, shoulders back, eyes calm yet observant, made her heart tangle with both intrigue and caution. She sipped her champagne, watching him move gracefully through the crowd. Every step, every gesture seemed deliberate, almost choreographed. And yet, when their eyes met across the room, something electric sparked, an unspoken acknowledgement of mutual curiosity. Elena felt a flutter in her chest, something she rarely allowed herself to feel at work. Her instincts screamed at her to stay professional, but another, more vulnerable part whispered, "This man is unlike anyone you've met." Peter approached. There was no awkward hesitation, no fumbling for words. He extended his hand with a quiet confidence. "Elena," he said, his voice smooth, calm, yet carrying an almost imperceptible edge of intrigue. "I've heard a lot about you." "And I've heard about you," Elena replied carefully, her professional mask firmly in place. Her mind raced, noting the small details, the subtle cufflinks engraved with initials, the faint cologne of sandalwood, and something more elusive, mysterious. Something about him felt untouchable, almost cold, yet undeniably magnetic. Their conversation flowed effortlessly. Peter was charming, articulate, and intelligent. He spoke about the gala, his work in business, and philanthropic endeavors with a precision that could be almost intimidating. Elena found herself both captivated and wary. Every sentence he spoke hinted at confidence, power, and success. But there was something beneath the surface. Something he didn't say, something he carefully hid. As the night wore on, Peter excused himself briefly. Elena noticed a subtle tension in his body language as he spoke into his phone in hushed tones, glancing over his shoulder as if making sure no one observed him too closely. A journalist's curiosity flared. There was a story here, she realized. A story buried beneath the polished veneer of a perfect CEO. Their paths crossed again near the balcony, overlooking the city skyline, the lights twinkling like a mirror of the stars above. Peter leaned casually on the railing, but his eyes were fixed on her. "Do you always observe everything so carefully?" he asked, a small smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. Elena tilted her head, unsure if he was teasing or testing her. "I notice things," she said cautiously. "Details. Little things that people often overlook." "Ah," he said softly, as if understanding more than he let on. "Details can be dangerous." His gaze lingered on her, sharp and assessing, sending a subtle shiver down her spine. There was a hint of a challenge in his expression, as though he wanted her to probe deeper, to question, but at the same time, to stay within the boundaries he set. Over the next few hours, they drifted between conversations, sometimes together, sometimes separately, their interactions always electric yet restrained. Elena couldn't shake the feeling that Peter was both revealing and hiding something. The way he would laugh lightly, then fall silent for a fraction of a second. The way he would offer a hand to help someone, then pull it back before it was fully needed. She sensed secrets, elegance shadowed by mystery. By the end of the evening, Elena felt a strange mixture of exhilaration and apprehension. She had met powerful men before, but Peter was different. He was polished, untouchable, and yet somehow raw in his authenticity. She found herself questioning, is he perfect, or is this perfection a carefully crafted illusion? Days later, Peter reached out with a casual invitation to coffee. A small, unassuming gesture, yet one that felt loaded with unspoken intention. Elena hesitated, feeling the tug between professional caution and personal curiosity. She reminded herself why she was drawn to this world, the thrill of uncovering the hidden, the story beneath the story. And Peter, with all his elegance and calculated composure, promised to be just that, a story she couldn't resist. When she arrived at the cafe, Peter was already there, seated in a corner with a single cup of black coffee, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. As Elena approached, He gestured subtly for her to sit. The moment her hand brushed the chair, she felt a spark, an almost physical recognition of proximity, a tension neither of them fully acknowledged. "Thank you for coming," Peter said, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of something unspoken. "I was curious," Elena admitted, cautiously meeting his gaze. Peter smiled faintly, a smirk that didn't reach his eyes entirely. "Curiosity can be dangerous," he said softly. His words hung between them, both a warning and an invitation. As their conversation continued, Elena found herself laughing at his dry humor, intrigued by his insights, yet all the while aware of the undercurrent of control and secrecy. Peter revealed just enough to entice, to draw her in, but always stopped short of full disclosure. And Elena, ever observant, noticed every flicker of emotion, every pause, every subtle gesture. She was caught in a delicate dance, each step drawing her closer to him, while her instincts warned her to step back. By the end of their meeting, the sun had begun to set, casting a warm glow through the cafe windows. Peter stood, offering a polite nod. "I hope this is the beginning of a rather interesting acquaintance." Elena smiled, her heart betraying a hint of excitement she wasn't ready to admit. "We'll see," she said, her voice steady, though her mind raced. "Something about him isn't right. And yet, I can't look away." As she walked away, she felt the faintest brush of his presence lingering in her thoughts. Questions surfaced, unbidden. Who is he really? What is he hiding? And why does the thought of uncovering the truth make her pulse race in ways she hadn't anticipated? Little did Elena know, their lives were about to become entangled in a web of secrets, danger, and a tension so electric it would challenge everything she thought she knew about trust, love, and ambition. The first spark had been struck, and it was only a matter of time before the fire would consume them both. The drive to Peter's family home felt like a journey into a world Elena had only glimpsed from the edges, opulent yet intimate, controlled yet warm. Peter sat behind the wheel, his hands steady on the leather steering wheel, posture rigid, gaze fixed on the road. He spoke little, offering only occasional comments about the landscape or the weather, his voice calm, smooth, with that subtle undertone of command that made Elena acutely aware of her every gesture. The countryside stretched out like a living painting. Rolling hills, golden fields shimmering under the late afternoon sun, clusters of trees forming natural sanctuaries. Elena's city-bred eyes scanned every detail, each cottage-style house, the ornate gates and flower beds. Yet, despite the idyllic scenery, a small tension lingered in the back of her mind. Why does he seem so guarded? Even here, in his home territory, something feels off. When they arrived at the house, Elena noticed the subtle contrast between Peter's controlled demeanor and the warmth exuded by the place itself. A stone pathway led to a charming, well-kept home, windows glowing with a soft golden light. Laughter floated into the evening air, mingling with the scent of blooming jasmine. She followed Peter up the steps, smoothing her dress, aware of the subtle tension between them. Every movement, every glance he offered carried a message, careful, attentive, yet closed off. Inside, Peter's sister, Lillian, greeted them with a wide, sincere smile. Her warmth was immediate and disarming, the kind of energy that enveloped a room. "Peter, you finally brought someone." "Elena, it's so wonderful to meet you." She pulled Elena into a brief, friendly hug. Her grip was soft but confident, a reflection of her easy charm. Elena felt the contrast immediately. Lillian radiated openness and trust, while Peter stood slightly behind her, composed, his expression neutral, observing her reaction as if testing boundaries. Elena's instincts stirred. He's hiding something even here. But why? The family dinner that followed was both delightful and subtly unnerving. Laughter and conversation flowed freely. Lillian recounted childhood stories, how Peter had meticulously built Lego castles, how he had always been ambitious, and how even as a teenager, he was unyielding in pursuit of perfection. Peter nodded politely, occasionally offering small, understated corrections or additional details. Each time he spoke, Elena noticed the care in his words, the precision, the almost mechanical attention to detail that contrasted with the casual warmth of the family atmosphere. As the night wore on, Elena observed small inconsistencies that gnawed at her journalist instincts. A photo on the mantelpiece had been slightly shifted, as if someone had recently adjusted it. A subtle crease on the tablecloth seemed out of place. And then, the soft, almost imperceptible tension in Peter's body whenever his sister asked a question about his business ventures. Nothing overt, nothing obvious, but enough for a careful observer to notice. During dessert, Peter excused himself briefly, leaving Elena and Lillian alone. Lillian leaned closer, her tone soft and conspiratorial. He's complicated, she said quietly. He has this way of being perfect on the outside, but there are sides to him that only a few people see. Be careful, Elena. Elena's curiosity piqued. What do you mean? She asked, though her voice betrayed only a fraction of her professional instinct. Lillian's eyes softened. I mean, he's cautious, even with the people he loves. There are parts of his life he keeps locked away. You'll see. Maybe you'll understand. Maybe you won't. Elena nodded, though inwardly, she was already spinning 1,000 theories. The warmth of Lillian's house clashed with the subtle, controlled aura Peter exuded, a dichotomy that made her head spin. She felt her instincts pulled in two directions. Her heart whispered, he's trustworthy, generous, kind. But her mind warned, something is hidden, something dangerous. After dinner, Peter returned, his presence immediately filling the room. He smiled politely at Elena, but the subtle stiffness in his posture told her he had been processing something, perhaps her conversation with Lillian. There was a brief, charged silence as he poured himself another drink, eyes briefly meeting hers with a flash of unreadable emotion. A brush of hands as he handed her a napkin sent a shiver down her spine. Small touches, small gestures, they were electric in their restraint. Later, as the night wound down, Elena found herself alone on the balcony with Peter once more. The cool night air brushed against her skin, carrying the faint scent of blooming jasmine from the gardens below. Peter leaned against the railing, shoulders relaxed but his gaze sharp, calculating. Do you enjoy surprises? He asked softly, almost rhetorically. Elena looked at him, unsure whether to answer honestly or with caution. Sometimes, she admitted, but I prefer to understand what I'm stepping into. He studied her for a moment, the faintest smirk tugging at his lips. Understanding can be overrated, he said, voice low, almost teasing, almost dangerous. Sometimes it's better to trust what you feel. Elena's chest tightened. She wanted to trust him, wanted to believe that the warmth she had seen in Lillian's home extended to Peter as well. Yet the subtle inconsistencies, the almost imperceptible hints of secrecy, kept her professional instincts on high alert. She was caught between two truths. The man before her seemed genuine, but something in her gut whispered otherwise. That night, as she lay in the guest room, Elena replayed every moment of the evening. The laughter, the warmth, the subtle tension, the fleeting touches, all of it combined into a complex mosaic she couldn't quite decode. She felt a magnetic pull toward Peter, but with it came a shadow of doubt. Is he truly who he says he is, or is this a performance? Sleep was elusive. Every shadow on the wall, every creak of the house seemed magnified in the quiet night. She found herself imagining scenarios. Peter's life behind closed doors, secrets hidden in his office, the duality of charm and control. The journalist in her buzzed with anticipation and fear, a story waiting to unfold. But beneath it all, the woman in her felt an undeniable thrill at being close to him, at the tension simmering just beneath the surface. By morning, the house was alive with warmth again. Breakfast was a lively affair, filled with the chatter of family members and the aroma of freshly baked bread. Peter remained composed, but Elena noticed the subtle changes, a softening in his gaze when Lillian spoke, a fleeting glance in her direction that lingered longer than casual politeness required. Small gestures, almost imperceptible, yet electric in their effect. As she prepared to leave, Peter walked her to the car. The air between them was charged, each step measured, deliberate. When they reached the car, he hesitated briefly, his hand brushing against hers. Elena felt the spark again, the subtle tension that had been building since their first encounter. Thank you for coming, Peter said, his voice quiet but carrying weight. Elena smiled, though her thoughts were tangled. Thank you for having me, she replied, the words sincere but layered with unspoken questions. He nodded, a fleeting vulnerability crossing his otherwise composed face. I hope this isn't the last time, he said softly, the statement carrying both invitation and challenge. As she drove away, Elena's mind replayed every moment. The warmth of the family, the subtle hints of secrecy, the fleeting touches, and the electric tension, all combined into a story she couldn't yet unravel. She was drawn to Peter, but the journalist in her knew better than to ignore the shadows. Something was hidden, something significant, and she was determined to uncover it. For the first time, Elena felt the duality of her life, personal desire and professional instinct, pulling her in opposite directions. She was captivated, cautious, and curious all at once. And she knew, deep down, that her next encounter with Peter would be even more revealing, more dangerous, and far more intoxicating than anything she had experienced before. The city skyline glimmered through the office window as Elena sat at her desk, the soft hum of computers around her a constant background to her racing thoughts. The gala, the countryside visit, Peter's composed presence, his fleeting touches, everything replayed in her mind with relentless intensity. But tonight, the professional side of her took over, a journalist's instinct demanding action. There was more to Peter than met the eye, and she couldn't ignore it. The tip had come anonymously. A single email, terse and cryptic, yet impossible to dismiss. Attached were files labeled with corporate accounts, encrypted but accessible with her skills. Elena's fingers trembled slightly as she opened them, her eyes scanning columns of numbers, transactions, and coded entries. At first, it appeared normal, routine corporate paperwork, but then patterns emerged. Offshore accounts, obscure transfers, shell companies. Her heart skipped. This isn't just accounting. This is money laundering. The rational part of her mind screamed caution. She didn't have proof, only patterns, assumptions, and circumstantial evidence. Yet, the journalist in her, the one who had chased bigger stories and darker secrets, felt the pull of duty. She leaned closer to the screen, scrutinizing each entry, tracing the money through layers of transactions. The deeper she went, the more tangled the web became. Peter's signature appeared in multiple places, subtly, almost hidden, as if camouflaged within the corporate machinery. Her pulse pounded. Could it be real? Was Peter, the man who had captivated her heart with that controlled calm, secretly involved in something illegal? Every memory of his gestures, the casual yet electric touches, the brief flashes of vulnerability, clashed violently with the evidence before her. As she worked late into the night, her mind wandered back to their last encounter. Peter's hand had brushed hers as he walked her to the car. That touch, so fleeting and yet so charged, now carried a shadow of doubt. She felt betrayed even before any accusation, torn between the personal and the professional. Could I really trust him? The next day, Elena tried to maintain composure, but every interaction with Peter now carried a hidden tension. He was charming, attentive, as always, but she noticed subtle things she hadn't before. The way his eyes flickered toward his briefcase when she mentioned the company, the slight hesitation in his speech when financial topics came up. Each small detail was a puzzle piece, and she couldn't ignore the growing picture forming in her mind. Despite the turmoil, Peter continued to draw her in. During a casual lunch meeting at a quiet downtown cafe, he was effortless in his presence. The way he smiled, the way his hand briefly touched hers over the table, it was intoxicating. Elena wanted to trust him, to believe that the man she had felt drawn to wasn't capable of such deception. But the files burned in her mind like a warning beacon. This could destroy him, or me. That evening, she returned to her apartment, the city lights painting patterns on her walls. She spread the documents across her dining table, mapping transactions, highlighting suspicious entries, connecting dots in frantic sketches. Sleep was impossible. Her mind oscillated between two extremes, the warmth she felt in Peter's presence and the cold, inescapable logic of the evidence. If this is real, she thought, staring at the figures, I have a responsibility. But what if I'm wrong? The thought was almost unbearable. Her career demanded the truth, demanded the story, demanded courage. But her heart, the part that wanted to trust, that had been drawn to him since the gala, warned of irreversible damage. She felt the weight of the decision pressing down, crushing her resolve. A knock on her door startled her, and she jumped. Peter stood there, casual yet commanding, as if he had sensed her inner turmoil. His eyes scanned her apartment briefly before settling on her face, sharp and assessing. Elena, he said softly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. You look exhausted. I've been reviewing some files, she replied cautiously, careful not to reveal the depth of her findings. Work-related. Peter's gaze lingered on the papers spread across the table. A flicker of something, curiosity, concern, suspicion, crossed his face before he masked it. I see, he said. And how do they make you feel? Elena hesitated, feeling the internal battle flare anew. Conflicted, she admitted finally. I don't know what to believe. He moved closer, his presence overwhelming yet intoxicating. Conflicted can mean many things, he murmured. It can mean doubt, fear, curiosity, desire, or all of them at once. His hand brushed against hers again, and she felt the electric tension spike. Her pulse raced, and she had to consciously pull back. I need to know the truth, she said, her voice trembling despite her effort to remain composed. Not your charm, not your touches. I need the facts. Peter's eyes darkened slightly, a shadow of something unreadable passing across his features. Facts can be elusive, he said quietly. Sometimes they hide behind intentions. Sometimes they are used to test loyalty. Elena's stomach churned. Was this a warning or a confession? She couldn't tell. The tension between them was palpable, electric, dangerous, and deeply intimate. She realized then that this was no longer just a professional dilemma. Her heart had entangled itself in ways she couldn't easily unravel. The following days were a tense blur. Elena continued her investigation in secret, tracing transactions, cross-referencing accounts, and digging into shell companies linked to Peter's enterprise. Every lead seemed to tighten the noose of suspicion around him. And yet, every encounter with Peter, the brief touches, the soft glances, the subtle teasing, made it harder to focus. The pull between attraction and duty was almost unbearable. One evening, while reviewing a particularly suspicious transfer, Elena stumbled upon a document that made her breath catch. It was a transfer from a foreign account, routed through multiple intermediaries, all traceable back to Peter's signature. Her hands shook. Here it was, the smoking gun, or at least it seemed so. Her professional instincts screamed at her to act, to write the story, to expose him. But her heart rebelled, reminding her of the man she had seen, the controlled elegance, the fleeting vulnerability, the moments of genuine connection. Torn, she leaned back in her chair, pressing her palms to her face. She felt the weight of the decision pressing down like a physical force. Career versus heart, truth versus love. Each option carried enormous risk. She could publish the story, destroy Peter's reputation, and perhaps save her career, but at what personal cost? Or she could ignore the evidence, protect him, and risk everything if she was wrong. Sleep evaded her once again, replaced by restless hours of plotting, considering, second-guessing. Every scenario ended with a tension so acute it left her breathless. She replayed their moments together, the brush of hands, the stolen glances, the unspoken promises embedded in fleeting smiles, and contrasted them with the evidence in front of her. The dichotomy was almost unbearable. And in the silence of her apartment, Elena finally whispered to herself, "I have to know, even if it destroys me, or him." Unbeknownst to her, the first seeds of suspicion, doubt, and conflict had been planted in Peter as well. He had noticed the subtle shift in her demeanor, the careful glances toward his briefcase, the questions that lingered beneath her polite conversation. He, too, was on edge, sensing that their delicate balance, trust and desire intertwined, was about to be tested in ways neither of them could predict. The game had begun, and in the shadows of their growing intimacy, secrets waited, ready to explode. The weekend had arrived, and the city streets glittered with golden light as evening descended. Elena found herself wandering into the familiar office lobby, still carrying the weight of the documents she had uncovered, the threads of suspicion tangling in her mind. Peter, as always, was already there, leaning casually against the reception desk, his posture relaxed, yet the calculated precision in his every movement impossible to ignore. As she approached, he straightened, the faintest smirk playing across his lips. "You're punctual," he noted, a subtle tease in his tone. Elena felt a flicker of heat rise to her cheeks. The way he observed her, calm yet penetrating, made her hyper-aware of every movement, every gesture. She adjusted the strap of her bag, her pulse betraying her composed exterior. "Someone has to keep the rhythm," she replied, careful not to reveal the whirlwind of emotions she carried inside. They walked together toward the elevator, the silence between them charged with an unspoken tension. Every brush of his shoulder against hers, every step so close that her arm almost grazed his, sent tiny sparks up her spine. Elena had learned to notice these moments, the subtlety of his control, the restraint that made each accidental touch feel electric. The day's meeting in the office was a blur of paperwork, corporate strategy, and muted tension. Yet beneath the surface, their connection simmered, each interaction layered with silent longing. Peter would make passing comments, lightly teasing her insights or offering sharp observations that forced her to reconsider her assumptions. Each time, the intellectual duel blended seamlessly with the subtle romantic undertone, keeping Elena on edge. By late afternoon, Peter suggested a break. "Come with me," he said, and without waiting for her response, he led her to a quiet rooftop garden atop the corporate building. The city stretched endlessly around them, lights flickering like distant stars. The breeze carried a hint of jasmine, and for a moment, Elena felt the weight of her suspicions lift, replaced by a rare sense of calm. Peter gestured toward a small bench tucked under a flowering arbor. "Sit," he commanded softly. She obeyed, feeling the tension in her shoulders ease slightly under his calm presence. He joined her, close enough that their knees almost touched, the proximity creating a quiet, unspoken electricity. "I wanted to give you something," he said after a pause, reaching into the inner pocket of his jacket. Elena watched, her curiosity mingling with the racing pulse in her chest. From his hand emerged a sleek fountain pen, polished dark mahogany with delicate gold trim. He extended it toward her. "This is for you," he said quietly. "A gift, yes, but also a symbol." His eyes searched hers, sharp and intent. A symbol of trust, of respect, and of potential. Elena took the pen, her fingers brushing his. The contact was fleeting, but the spark was undeniable. She felt an unexpected warmth spread through her chest. "It's beautiful," she whispered, turning it over in her hands, noting the craftsmanship. It was elegant, precise, and meaningful, a reflection of him, she realized. Peter leaned back slightly, his gaze never leaving hers. "I chose it carefully," he said softly. "Not just as a gift, but as a statement. I trust you with this. And I hope you'll trust me in return." Her mind raced. Every professional instinct screamed caution. This was a man she had reasons to suspect, a man whose secrets could destroy everything. Yet the emotional pull was undeniable, intoxicating. How can someone so perfectly controlled make me feel so exposed? Elena closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting the breeze brush against her face. When she opened them, she met his gaze. I don't know if I can," she admitted honestly, her voice low. "Trust, I mean. Not yet." Peter's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "I didn't expect you to," he murmured. "Trust isn't given lightly. It's earned. And perhaps it's complicated by circumstances." His words hung between them, heavy with implication. For the next hour, they sat together, speaking in soft, careful tones. Peter revealed glimpses of his world, projects he was passionate about, moments of vulnerability he rarely shared, but always stopping short of full disclosure. Elena found herself drawn to the complexity beneath his composed exterior, the contrast between his control and the subtle hints of humanity he allowed her to see. As the sun began to set, casting golden and pink hues across the skyline, Peter reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was tender, deliberate, intimate, and it left Elena breathless. Her mind screamed caution, her instincts warning of danger, yet her heart betrayed her, longing for more. "You feel conflicted," he said softly, reading the hesitation in her expression. "I can see it. And I don't expect resolution, not now. Not yet." But his hand lingered near hers, a silent promise, a tentative bridge across the distance between them. Elena nodded, swallowing hard. "I don't know how to feel," she admitted. "Every time I think I understand, something shifts." Peter's gaze softened slightly, and for a brief, almost imperceptible moment, the wall around him faltered. "That's because what we're navigating, it isn't simple. Life isn't simple. People aren't simple. And neither am I." The pen rested in Elena's hand, heavy with significance. It was more than a gift. It was a tangible manifestation of trust, of the fragile connection forming between them. Every glance, every touch, every carefully measured word added layers to a relationship built on intrigue, tension, and unspoken desire. Later that evening, as Elena returned to her apartment, she turned the pen over in her hand repeatedly. Its weight was comforting yet provocative, a reminder of both intimacy and restraint. Her thoughts oscillated between suspicion and desire, between caution and curiosity. The dichotomy was maddening, yet irresistible. Lying in bed, Elena replayed the day over and over. The rooftop garden, the delicate brush of Peter's fingers, the gift of the pen, the silent confessions in his gaze. She felt the magnetic pull of him, an intoxicating combination of warmth, restraint, and mystery. And beneath it all, a quiet awareness. Her heart had begun to choose, even as her mind demanded vigilance. That night, she realized the truth she could no longer deny. The line between professional duty and personal desire was blurring. Each encounter, each fleeting touch, each moment of vulnerability was deepening her connection to Peter. And with it came the inescapable tension, the growing risk that the secrets she suspected might shatter everything they were beginning to build. In the quiet of her room, Elena whispered to herself, "I don't know if I can trust him, but I can't stop feeling this." And somewhere across the city, Peter, seated alone in his office, reviewed the same files Elena had been obsessing over. He knew she was close, closer than she realized. And he also knew that the delicate dance of trust, suspicion, and desire had only just begun. The game between them was intensifying, and both were acutely aware. The stakes were no longer just professional. They were profoundly personal. The city office buzzed with a quiet intensity, a rhythm of work and ambition that never seemed to sleep. Elena sat at her desk, the golden light of the late afternoon filtering through the blinds. She had the documents spread before her again, the evidence she had painstakingly pieced together, a labyrinth of financial transactions, offshore accounts, and coded entries that seemed to implicate Peter. The weight of the truth pressed heavily on her shoulders. Her phone buzzed sharply, yanking her out of her thoughts. It was her editor, David, a man whose presence was equal parts intimidation and inspiration. His text was brief, almost ruthless. "Elena, I need that story. We can't wait. If you don't deliver, someone else will, and it won't be pretty for Peter. Or you." Elena's breath caught. The pressure was immediate, suffocating. The editor's words left no room for hesitation. She could feel the fire of ambition inside her, the drive to uncover the truth, to publish a story that could define her career. But alongside it, the pull of her heart refused to be silenced. Peter had become more than just a subject. He was complicated, enigmatic, alive with contradictions, and, against every professional instinct, he had begun to mean something to her. She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes. Every instinct screamed caution, but every fiber of her being pulsed with uncertainty. If I publish, I could destroy him. If I don't, I risk my career and credibility. The editor's message was clear. Someone else would take her place, someone who wouldn't hesitate, someone who would revel in exposing Peter. She felt the corner of the professional world pressing in, a relentless reminder that opportunity and danger often came hand in hand. Peter, oblivious to the full scope of her dilemma, contacted her later that evening, asking for a brief meeting. She agreed, though every nerve in her body was taut with tension. She found him waiting in the quiet of his office, a glass of whiskey in hand, the city lights reflecting off the glass walls. His presence was both comforting and unnerving, a paradox she had come to both fear and crave. "You've been distant," Peter remarked, his tone gentle but probing. "Is everything all right?" Elena hesitated, aware that any slip could tip him off. "I'm fine," she said carefully, though the lie felt heavy on her tongue. He studied her, eyes narrowing slightly, and then leaned forward, resting his hands on the polished desk. "Elena, I sense there's more," he said softly. "You're not here just to discuss the project, are you?" Her chest tightened. How could she explain the torrent of conflicting emotions? The professional duty screaming for justice, the fear of destroying someone she had grown to care about, and the magnetic pull of Peter himself? She shook her head slightly, forcing herself to maintain composure. Peter leaned back, the faintest shadow of frustration crossing his face. "I don't know what you're hiding," he said quietly, "but I do know that if this is about my work or my life, I want you to know that I trust you, even if you don't trust me yet." The word struck Elena like a physical blow. Trust. A simple word, yet so loaded with meaning. The pen he had given her, the fleeting touches, the rooftop conversations, they all converged into a single moment of clarity. She was in over her head, caught between truth and desire, between loyalty and duty. She left the office that evening with her mind spinning. The streets seemed narrower, the city lights harsher, the air heavier. Every thought revolved around the same impossible choice: career or heart, exposure or protection. She had spent years honing her instincts, sharpening her journalistic edge, and yet here she was, paralyzed by the complexity of human connection and moral ambiguity. Back in her apartment, the documents lay before her, a silent testament to the chaos brewing in her life. Every transaction, every coded entry, every offshore account seemed to mock her indecision. She was painfully aware that only she had the power to either protect Peter or expose him. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating. Hours later, her phone buzzed again. Another message from David. "Elena, time is running out. Make a choice." The words felt like a dagger. Make a choice. The ultimatum cut through every rational thought, leaving only raw emotion and instinct. Elena felt tears prick at her eyes, frustration and fear mingling with longing. She paced her apartment, the city lights casting long shadows on the walls, a visual echo of the moral labyrinth she faced. "I can't destroy him," she whispered to herself, pacing. "I can't, but what if I'm wrong?" Her phone rang. It was Peter. Her heart skipped, a chaotic rhythm that mirrored her internal struggle. "Elena," he said calmly, "meet me. Please. I need to see you." She hesitated, then agreed, feeling the pull of both obligation and curiosity. They met at a quiet park, the night cool and still, the city noises softened by distance. Peter approached, his silhouette framed by the soft glow of a lamppost. His expression was unreadable, calm, yet heavy with unspoken emotion. "Elena," he said softly, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "I can feel the tension between us. Whatever it is, we need to address it." Her chest tightened. "Peter, I don't know what to do," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I have information, things that could." He placed a finger gently on her lips, stopping her mid-sentence. "Sho," he said. "I don't want to hear accusations right now. I want to understand you. And I want you to understand me." The closeness was overwhelming. The air between them seemed charged, electric with unspoken desire and fear. Elena felt the familiar pull, the magnetic tension that had been building since their first encounter. She wanted to trust him, wanted to believe in the man behind the controlled exterior, but the journalist inside her screamed for caution. "I feel torn," she admitted finally. "I don't know what's right anymore. My instincts say one thing, my heart says another." Peter's eyes softened, a rare vulnerability breaking through. "Elena, life isn't black and white. Trust isn't given freely, and love isn't simple. But sometimes, the right choice isn't the easiest one. And sometimes, you have to risk everything to protect what matters." Her heart ached. His words resonated with her on a level that transcended professional duty. The moral labyrinth she faced, the ethical dilemma between exposing the truth and protecting someone she had come to care about, was now intertwined with the undeniable pull of desire. As they stood there, the night stretching infinitely around them, Elena realized something she had been avoiding. The story, the career, the ambition, they were all intertwined with her feelings for Peter, and the stakes were higher than she had imagined. For the first time, she understood the true weight of her power. Only she could protect Peter or destroy him. Only she could choose between career triumph and the fragile, intoxicating trust that had begun to form between them. And in that moment, standing in the cool night air, feeling the warmth radiating from him, she realized the truth she could no longer ignore. Her heart was inextricably entangled with the fate of the man before her. The night ended with no resolution, only the lingering tension of unspoken words and dangerous choices. Elena walked away with her mind racing, the echo of Peter's gaze following her, a reminder that the ethical conflict, the editorial pressure, and the silent tug of desire were far from over. And somewhere in the shadows of the city, Peter watched her leave, knowing that the delicate balance of trust and suspicion, professional duty and personal desire, had reached its most critical juncture. The stakes had never been higher, and neither had the risk. The office was unusually silent that evening, the faint hum of the HVAC system the only sound as Elena approached Peter's executive suite. Her stomach twisted with a mix of fear, anticipation, and determination. She clutched the files tightly, knowing that the moment she stepped through those doors, everything between them could shatter. Every step echoed in the marble hallway, a rhythm that matched the rapid beat of her heart. Peter was already there, standing near the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights stretching infinitely behind him. His posture was relaxed, yet the tension in his shoulders betrayed awareness. As she entered, his gaze snapped to hers, sharp, penetrating, and instantly making her feel both exposed and accountable. "Elena," he said, his voice calm but edged with something she couldn't quite name. "You look determined." She swallowed hard. "Peter, we need to talk," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "About the documents, and about what I've discovered." Peter's expression darkened almost imperceptibly. "I see," he said, moving closer, his steps silent on the polished floor. "And what exactly have you discovered?" Elena hesitated. Every instinct screamed caution. This wasn't just a professional confrontation, it was a personal minefield. She could see it in his eyes, the mix of anticipation and apprehension, the silent challenge. Her heart raced as she opened her mouth. I've found financial discrepancies," she began, her fingers tightening around the folder. "Transactions that are suspicious. Offshore accounts, coded transfers. And some of them trace back to you." Peter's eyes narrowed, a storm building behind their controlled exterior. "I see," he said again, this time his voice sharper. "And do you intend to believe that without confirmation? Or are you speaking based on assumptions?" Elena felt a flash of anger. At him, at herself, at the cruel irony of the situation. "I don't want to believe anything without proof," she admitted. "But the patterns, they're troubling. And you have to understand, Peter, as a journalist, I can't ignore it." The room seemed to shrink, the tension between them palpable. Peter's gaze was intense, scrutinizing her as if trying to read her every thought. "Elena," he said slowly, deliberately, "you're standing here accusing me of something you can't yet prove, and yet you brought it to me. That is betrayal. Do you understand what that feels like?" Her heart clenched. She had expected anger, perhaps defensive words, but not the sting of accusation in his tone. "It's not betrayal," she said, her voice trembling. "It's caution. I need to know the truth. I need to protect the integrity of the story and myself." Peter's jaw tightened, his usual calm giving way to something sharper, more human. "Integrity," he repeated, almost mockingly. And what about trust, Elena? What about loyalty? What about the bond we've begun to build? Her throat went dry. Every memory of their shared moments, the rooftop garden, the subtle touches, the gift of the pen, the intimate glances, flooded her mind, clashing violently with the evidence in front of her. She felt paralyzed, torn between two irreconcilable worlds. I don't know, she admitted, tears threatening to spill. I want to trust you, I really do. But the evidence, it's there. I can't ignore it. I have to investigate further. Peter's eyes darkened, a storm of emotion she had never seen before. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming, forcing her to feel every ounce of the tension building between them. Elena, he said, his voice low, almost a growl. You've chosen suspicion over the person who trusted you. And that hurts more than anything else. The words struck her like a physical blow. She had anticipated anger, disappointment, frustration, but not this raw, piercing hurt. She felt the weight of his disappointment, the depth of the emotional chasm that had opened between them. I'm trying to do what's right, she whispered, her voice breaking. I'm not trying to hurt you. I don't want to lose what we have. Peter's hand shot out, stopping her mid-sentence. Lose? You've already put that at risk, he said, his eyes flashing with an intensity that made her heart skip. You brought this suspicion to me before giving me a chance to explain. That is a line you cannot uncross. Elena felt the sting of tears as the tension between them reached a crescendo. Her professional instincts screamed for caution, for investigation, for truth. Her heart screamed for connection, for trust, for understanding. The two forces collided violently, leaving her reeling. Peter turned away for a moment, running a hand through his hair, his back tense. You don't understand, he said, his voice quieter, but no less sharp. There are things at play that you cannot see yet. Decisions, risks, responsibilities. And you, by acting without full knowledge, have put all of it in jeopardy. Elena swallowed, fighting the urge to reach out, to bridge the distance, to offer reassurance. Then tell me, she said, her voice firm despite the tremor. Tell me what I don't know. I can't act blindly, but I also can't stand in the dark. Peter's silence was heavy, almost unbearable. He turned to face her, the storm in his eyes giving way to a fleeting vulnerability. Elena, some things I cannot explain yet. And some things you will only understand when the time is right. But know this, you've crossed into territory where trust is not just desired, it is required. And right now you've shattered it. The room seemed to pulse with the intensity of the confrontation. Elena felt the weight of the unspoken truths, the secrets he held, and the gravity of her own actions. The emotional stakes had never been higher. She wanted to reach for him, to bridge the distance, to reassure him that her intentions were pure, but the fear of misstep, of causing irreparable damage, held her back. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Their eyes locked, a silent battlefield of desire, accusation, fear, and longing. Elena realized that this confrontation was more than just about documents or suspicions. It was a test of their entire connection, a crucible that would determine whether trust and desire could coexist amidst secrets and professional duty. Finally, Peter spoke again, his voice softer but no less firm. You've made your choice, Elena. And now we wait. We see if what you've done can be forgiven, or if it's the end. Elena's heart ached. The words felt final, yet she knew the story was far from over. This confrontation had ignited a fire, emotional, moral, and romantic, that neither of them could easily extinguish. And in the shadows of that office, beneath the city lights, both understood. The stakes had risen beyond professional duty or personal desire. The consequences of this confrontation would ripple through every aspect of their lives. As she left the office, the files clutched tightly in her hands. Elena felt a strange mixture of fear and resolve. The confrontation had changed everything. Peter's guarded nature had cracked, revealing a vulnerability that left her both terrified and yearning. And she knew, with a certainty that both excited and terrified her, that the next move she made would define not only her career but the fragile, electric connection she had with him. The night swallowed her as she walked through the streets, the city lights reflecting the turbulence in her heart. She was caught between duty and desire, suspicion and trust, fear and longing. And somewhere, in the silent corners of her mind, she realized that the confrontation had only begun. The real storm was still coming. The night after the confrontation, Elena returned to her apartment, her mind spinning with a storm of unresolved questions, guilt, and lingering desire. Every detail from her meeting with Peter replayed in her mind. His piercing gaze, the restrained but palpable tension in his voice, the subtle gestures that conveyed both hurt and vulnerability. She felt torn between loyalty and professional duty, between her instincts as a journalist and her growing attachment to him. She spread the files out on her kitchen table, illuminated by the dim glow of a single lamp. Financial transactions, coded entries, offshore accounts. Each piece of evidence seemed to taunt her. But a nagging feeling persisted. The more she examined the details, the less they seemed to point directly to Peter. There were patterns, anomalies, and inconsistencies that suggested a carefully orchestrated setup. Elena's phone buzzed, a message appearing from an unknown number. Check the last transfer. The trail is not where you think it is. Trust no one, but look closer to his inner circle. A friend. Her heart leapt. The anonymous tip was both thrilling and terrifying. Someone was guiding her, but who? And why? She knew this could be a trap, but the urgency in the message compelled her to act. The following days became a tense blur. Elena moved quietly, tracing the financial trail with renewed determination, cross-referencing names, dates, and accounts. The deeper she dug, the clearer the pattern became. While Peter had been careful and meticulous, the real manipulator was someone within his inner circle, someone with access and authority. Finally, a name emerged repeatedly. Richard Hale, Peter's deputy, a man whose polished exterior and unwavering professionalism masked a darker ambition. His fingerprints were subtle but undeniable, scattered throughout the financial network, misdirecting suspicion while profiting from illicit transactions. Elena felt a mixture of relief and dread. Peter's integrity had been falsely questioned, but the danger was far from over. She now faced the dual challenge of exposing Richard without tipping him off, while protecting Peter from the fallout of her investigation. Late one night, as she pieced together the final elements of her findings, a sudden noise outside her apartment door startled her. Heart racing, she approached cautiously, only to find herself grabbed from behind and dragged into a waiting van. Panic surged through her body, but her training as a journalist and survivor instincts kicked in. She struggled, her mind racing through possible escape routes. Inside the van, the lights were dim, and her assailants remained silent, their intentions clear. The realization hit her with icy clarity. Someone knew she had uncovered the truth, and they were willing to go to extreme lengths to silence her. Meanwhile, Peter sensed something was wrong. A gut instinct, honed by years of navigating high-stakes business and betrayal, told him Elena was in danger. Without hesitation, he mobilized, contacting trusted allies, tracing her last known location, and preparing for the worst. The city around them became a tense web of urgency and peril. The van stopped abruptly, and Elena's captors forced her out into an abandoned warehouse. The shadows loomed, the metallic scent of danger filling the air. Fear surged, but determination held her steady. She refused to succumb without a fight, silently planning her next move. Outside, Peter's car screeched to a halt. He had traced the van through a combination of surveillance feeds and instinct. Without a second thought, he stormed the warehouse, assessing the situation with the precision and control that had defined him. The confrontation was immediate. His presence, commanding and intense, caused hesitation among Elena's captors. A struggle ensued, fast, chaotic, and dangerous. Peter's movements were calculated, blending physical precision with strategic thinking. Elena, seizing the distraction, freed herself, grabbing a nearby pipe to defend against one of the assailants. Shots rang out, echoing through the warehouse, the air thick with tension. Finally, Peter cornered the main perpetrator, Richard Hale. The revelation was explosive. Richard, caught in his own web of deception, sneered but could not escape. His ambitions, carefully masked, unraveled in front of Elena and Peter. "Elena," Peter said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, her pulse racing. "No, thanks to you." Her eyes, however, betrayed a mix of fear, relief, and something deeper, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond that had been forged through shared danger. Peter turned to Richard, his gaze icy. "It ends here. All of it. You won't harm anyone else, and the truth will come out." With the authorities now alerted, Richard was apprehended. Elena felt a wave of relief and vindication. The danger had passed, but the intensity of the events left an indelible mark on her psyche. She had faced fear, moral conflict, and the tangible threat to her life, and emerged stronger, more resolved, and with a clearer understanding of both Peter and herself. In the aftermath, Elena compiled her findings, meticulously documenting Richard's culpability and Peter's innocence. The story she would publish was no longer about suspicion or scandal. It was about truth, justice, and the dangers of deceit hidden behind polished facades. When she finally met Peter again, the tension had shifted. The air between them was still charged, but now with gratitude, respect, and an unspoken acknowledgement of what they had endured together. Peter's controlled exterior softened, revealing the depth of relief and pride he felt for Elena's courage. "You did it," he said quietly, the words heavy with admiration and something else, something tender that had been simmering beneath the surface for weeks. Elena smiled, feeling a release of the tension that had gripped her for so long. "We did it," she corrected gently, her eyes meeting his. "I couldn't have done it without you." The revelation of Richard Hale's deception not only cleared Peter's name, but also solidified the fragile trust and connection between them. The high-stakes drama had reached its climax, but it also paved the way for a deeper, more genuine bond. As the night settled over the city, Elena and Peter stood together, side by side, their shared ordeal a silent testament to resilience, courage, and the complex interplay of trust and desire. The storm had passed, but the intimacy born from navigating danger together had created a bond neither could deny. And in that quiet moment, amidst the shadows and city lights, Elena realized the journey through suspicion, danger, and moral conflict had brought them closer than she had ever imagined possible. Trust had been tested, lives had been threatened, but in the end, truth and courage had prevailed, and love, quietly but undeniably, had begun to bloom. The warehouse air was thick with tension, the shadows stretching like long fingers across the concrete floor. Elena's hands trembled as she crouched behind a stack of crates, listening to the low murmur of voices and the scrape of boots across the floor. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing the dread she felt. She had been cornered, trapped by Richard Hale's desperate network, and the realization of just how close she had come to real danger sent a shiver down her spine. Every instinct screamed to escape, but every potential route was blocked. Her mind raced, calculating, searching for a flaw, a weak point in her captor's movements. She could feel the adrenaline sharpening her senses, the faint metallic tang of the air, the distant hum of a broken light, the subtle shifts in the shadows. Danger was tangible, imminent, and yet she refused to succumb to panic. Meanwhile, Peter's mind was a relentless machine of focus and calculation. He had traced Elena's phone signal to the warehouse, and, leveraging every resource and connection at his disposal, had navigated the labyrinthine back streets of the industrial district. His car screeched to a halt outside, tires skidding across the asphalt. In a flash, he assessed the situation, entrances, exits, shadows, and potential threats, before moving with silent precision toward the building. Inside, Elena's thoughts flickered to him. Despite the fear, she could almost feel his presence, the quiet assurance that he would come for her. But reality hit. Richard's men were everywhere, their eyes sharp, their movements coordinated. She had only moments to act. A sudden noise, a crate tipping over, caused one of the guards to shout. Elena seized the moment, darting toward a narrow exit she had noticed earlier, her pulse a drumbeat in her ears. But another guard blocked her path, his arm swinging out. She ducked, barely avoiding the grasp, her heart racing as she realized she was on the edge of capture and disaster. Then, a sudden flash of movement. Peter appeared, silent and lethal, taking the guard by surprise. In a blur, he neutralized the threat, his movements precise, controlled, and devastating in their efficiency. Elena watched, a mix of awe and relief washing over her. He was like a force of nature, calm in the chaos, untouchable yet wholly present. "Elena." His voice cut through the din, steady, commanding. She didn't hesitate, running toward him, feeling the tension and fear melt into trust. They moved together through the maze of crates, dodging and weaving as another guard lunged at them. Peter intercepted, a swift strike, and they pressed forward, adrenaline propelling them toward the exit. The night exploded around them. Shouts, the cracking of wooden pallets, the sharp retort of gunfire as the police, alerted by Peter's earlier call, converged on the warehouse. Every movement was heightened, every heartbeat amplified. Elena could barely process the sequence of events, her mind a kaleidoscope of fear, relief, and an undeniable connection to the man beside her. Finally, they reached the large metal doors leading outside. Peter pulled them open, and the cool night air hit them like a cleansing wave. The city lights glittered, distant but tangible, offering a sense of safety that felt surreal after the chaos inside. Elena stumbled slightly, her strength waning, but Peter's steadying hand on her arm kept her upright. "You're safe now," he said softly, his eyes scanning her face, searching for any sign of injury. "I've got you." Tears pricked at the corners of Elena's eyes, her fear giving way to relief and gratitude. You saved me," she whispered, her voice trembling. The weight of the moment, the danger they had just endured, pressed heavily against her chest. Peter's gaze softened, the icy control giving way to something warmer, more human. I promised I would, he said quietly. No one harms you while I can stop it. Not ever. In the aftermath, amidst flashing police lights and the distant wail of sirens, they stood together, adrenaline slowly subsiding, leaving in its place a raw, unfiltered awareness of their connection. Every touch, every glance, every subtle brush of his hand against hers carried a depth of meaning that words could not capture. Elena finally allowed herself to exhale, leaning slightly against him. The chaos of the night had forged an unspoken bond, trust earned not through words, but through shared danger, courage, and the relentless protection Peter had offered. I don't know what to say, Elena admitted, her voice barely audible over the settling night. I was so scared. Peter's hand cupped her cheek gently, his thumb brushing away a stray tear. You don't have to say anything, he murmured. All that matters is that you're safe. That's all I care about. The intensity of the moment pressed upon them, a mixture of relief, lingering fear, and undeniable desire. Elena's heart raced, not just from the night's peril, but from the closeness, the trust, the intimacy forged in fire. She realized, with breathtaking clarity, that the man standing before her, the cold, precise, controlled man who had melted for her in these moments, was no longer just a subject of suspicion or desire. He was her anchor, her protector, and someone she deeply, irrevocably cared for. Peter leaned in slightly, their faces inches apart. The air between them vibrated with tension, silent longing, and the unspoken acknowledgement of what had just passed. Elena, he said softly, his lips barely moving, I need you to know. I trust you. I trust you more than anyone. And I care about you. More than I should, perhaps, but I do. Elena's breath caught. The words, soft yet laden with emotion, hit her like a revelation. The walls she had built, the doubts, the suspicions, the moral dilemmas, all seemed to dissolve in that moment. She reached out, her hand brushing his, the contact electric. Peter, I trust you too, she whispered, her voice shaking with the release of tension and fear. For the first time in weeks, perhaps months, they allowed themselves a moment of connection untainted by suspicion, danger, or professional boundaries. The city around them blurred, irrelevant compared to the intensity of the bond forged in fire. They had survived peril, deception, and moral conflict, and in doing so, had rebuilt the fragile, profound trust that had begun to take root between them. As the police secured the scene and Richard Hale was taken into custody, Elena and Peter remained side by side, their fingers brushing, their bodies close, sharing silent acknowledgement of the journey they had endured. The night had been a crucible, testing courage, trust, and the capacity to love amidst chaos. And they had emerged stronger, united, and undeniably connected. Finally, as the night began to soften into the early hours of dawn, Peter spoke again, his voice low, almost a whisper, yet filled with undeniable sincerity. We've faced the worst together, Elena. And yet, here we are, alive, unbroken, and maybe, ready for what comes next. Elena smiled, the tension finally giving way to warmth, relief, and a burgeoning sense of hope. Yes, she said softly. Maybe it's time to see what comes next. Together. And in that quiet, tender moment, amidst the remnants of danger and the lingering adrenaline, the trust between them was cemented, not just by words, but by shared courage, survival, and the undeniable truth of their feelings. The city had woken to a new dawn, the golden light spilling across glass towers and busy streets, reflecting a world that was beginning to breathe again after a night of chaos. Elena sat at her desk in the newspaper office, the documents meticulously organized before her, the keyboard warm beneath her fingers. Every line, every carefully crafted sentence was infused with the intensity of recent events, the adrenaline of danger, and the unshakable commitment to truth. Her hands hovered over the keys for a moment, feeling the weight of responsibility. The story she was about to publish was not just another investigative piece. It was a narrative of betrayal, courage, and vindication. The intricacies of Richard Hale's schemes were laid bare. Offshore accounts, coded transactions, and the subtle misdirection that had almost implicated Peter. The article did not merely expose a criminal. It cleared an innocent man's name and restored balance to a world temporarily thrown into chaos. Her phone buzzed softly, a text from Peter. Are you ready? Elena took a deep breath, her pulse quickening. She had been through fear, doubt, and moral conflict, but now she felt the calm after the storm, the clarity that comes with knowing the truth. With one final glance at the organized evidence, she hit publish. The newsroom erupted. Phones rang, editors shouted, and journalists scrambled to verify the impact. The story spread rapidly online, gaining traction across social media platforms and news outlets. The headline was precise, factual, and unflinching. Inside the scheme, how Richard Hale betrayed trust and almost destroyed Peter Morgan. The narrative was careful. Peter's name appeared only in context as a victim of deception, his integrity highlighted, his reputation restored. Elena had balanced professionalism with empathy, ensuring that truth prevailed without unnecessary sensationalism. Her fingers trembled slightly as she watched the first waves of public reaction, praise for her investigative rigor, admiration for her courage, and widespread acknowledgement of Peter's innocence. Meanwhile, Peter stood in his office, overlooking the city, the early morning sun illuminating the skyline. He had received the alerts, the messages, the flood of supportive responses. Relief washed over him, not just because justice had been served, but because the woman he had come to trust and care for had orchestrated it with brilliance, courage, and precision. He pressed a call to Elena, the connection ringing through the city's awakening streets. "Elena," he said, his voice low and steady, filled with both gratitude and unspoken emotion. "I saw the story. You did it. You cleared everything." And her laugh, soft but triumphant, interrupted him. "We did it," she corrected. "I couldn't have done it without knowing you were there, guiding me, protecting me, trusting me." There was a pause, a quiet moment stretched between them, heavy with meaning. Peter's gaze, though distant, seemed to reach across the network, connecting him to her in a way that transcended the digital line. "Trust," he said finally, a smile softening his usually controlled expression. "We've earned it. Both of us." Elena felt warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of relief, pride, and deep emotional connection. She had navigated danger, moral complexity, and personal risk, and in doing so, had not only saved a career and a reputation, but had also solidified a bond that was unshakable. The media storm subsided gradually, leaving behind a narrative of justice and recognition. Richard Hale faced immediate legal consequences, his network dismantled, his influence eradicated. The clarity of the truth left no room for doubt, and the public's perception of Peter shifted instantly, from suspicion to admiration, from doubt to respect. Peter invited Elena to meet in person, away from the glare of screens and cameras, in the private solace of his office. She arrived, carrying only a quiet confidence and the remnants of adrenaline still clinging to her nerves. He stood from behind his desk, crossing the room swiftly. "Elena," he said, a mixture of relief and admiration in his voice, "thank you. Not just for the story, but for everything. For your courage, your integrity, your heart." Elena's gaze met his, and in that instant, the layers of professional tension, fear, and moral conflict melted away. She stepped closer, her hand brushing against his, the contact electric yet grounding. "Peter, we've both been through so much. But now, we can finally breathe and move forward." He nodded, his hand covering hers, a silent acknowledgement of shared endurance and trust. The air between them was charged, no longer with suspicion or danger, but with the quiet power of connection forged through adversity. Over the following weeks, the aftermath of the story unfolded smoothly. Elena's article won acclaim, bringing recognition not just to her investigative skill, but also to her courage in facing threats and moral dilemmas. Peter's reputation was fully restored, his business dealings scrutinized and validated, and the public narrative shifted entirely in his favor. Their professional lives stabilized, careers flourishing with renewed momentum. Yet beyond the professional victories, a deeper story unfolded, one of intimacy, trust, and emotional growth. The experiences they had shared, the confrontation, the danger, the rescue, had created an unbreakable bond. They began to spend more time together, not in the press of professional duty, but in quiet moments of shared laughter, conversation, and subtle touches that spoke volumes. One afternoon, Elena found herself in Peter's office again, reviewing reports, but the tension of earlier weeks was gone. Peter leaned against the desk casually, a playful smirk on his lips. "You know," he said, "we make a pretty good team. Dangerous, sure, but effective." Elena laughed softly, the sound light and unburdened. "Effective and alive," she corrected, her eyes meeting his in a spark of shared understanding. "And maybe that's enough for now." Peter stepped closer, his hand brushing hers once more, the contact lingering. "Enough," he murmured. "For a lifetime, if we choose." In that moment, amidst the city skyline and the quiet victory of justice restored, Elena realized that the storm had brought more than professional triumph. It had forged a connection, unbreakable and profound, rooted in courage, trust, and the willingness to risk everything for truth and for each other. And so, with the story published, justice served, and trust rebuilt, they finally allowed themselves to imagine a future not dictated by fear, suspicion, or danger, but by choice, by love, and by the shared recognition that the trials they had faced had only brought them closer together. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of blooming flowers and fresh dew. Elena stood at the edge of the riverbank garden, her hands lightly clutching the folds of her dress. The sun reflected off the water, scattering golden shards across the meticulously landscaped grounds, as if nature itself had conspired to make this day unforgettable. Today was the culmination of everything they had endured: fear, moral conflict, danger, trust, and love. Today, she and Peter would make their commitment public, and the world would witness not just a union of hearts, but the triumph of perseverance, honesty, and shared courage. Peter arrived quietly, his tailored suit perfectly fitted, yet his usually controlled demeanor softened with an unmistakable warmth. When his eyes met hers, Elena felt the familiar flutter, a mix of excitement, tenderness, and a hint of the vulnerability that Peter rarely revealed. He walked toward her with steady, deliberate steps, and for a moment, the bustling world around them faded, leaving only the quiet rhythm of their shared heartbeat. "Elena," he said softly, stopping a mere breath away, "you look radiant." His voice carried a subtle tremor, betraying the depth of emotion he often kept hidden behind composure and control. She smiled, the curve of her lips reflecting the confidence, love, and relief she felt. "Peter, you look perfect," she replied, her words light yet laden with meaning, echoing the countless intimate moments they had shared. As they approached the ceremonial area, friends, family, and colleagues gathered, the atmosphere charged with warmth, joy, and quiet anticipation. Elena's gaze swept over the familiar faces: her editor, who had reluctantly trusted her instincts; Peter's sister, smiling knowingly; colleagues who had witnessed their journey from cautious partnership to deep emotional connection. All of them had been part of the narrative, some silently, some actively, but all had contributed to the story of triumph and love that now reached its peak. The officiant began, speaking words that felt both formal and intimate. "Today, we gather not just to witness a union of two hearts, but to honor the journey that brought them here, a journey through challenge, trust, danger, and discovery." Elena felt the weight and truth of the statement resonate deeply. Every trial, every confrontation, every late-night investigation, every moment of tension had led them here, to this serene garden by the river. Peter took her hands in his, the physical contact electric yet grounding. "Elena," he said, his eyes never leaving hers, "I promise to protect you, trust you, and love you through every challenge and every triumph. I promise to honor the courage and integrity that define you, and to be your partner in every sense for all the days ahead." Elena's voice quivered slightly as she replied, "Peter, I promise to stand with you, to trust you, to support you, and to share every joy and every hardship. Together, we will face the world, uphold truth, and nurture the love that has brought us here." The officiant's words blended with the gentle rustle of leaves and the soft ripple of the river. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you partners in life and love." A hush fell over the gathering, followed by a collective exhale of joy and relief. Peter lifted Elena's hand to his lips, kissing it with a tenderness that spoke of unspoken promises, shared battles, and unwavering devotion. The audience erupted into applause, cheers mingling with laughter and joyful tears. But for Elena and Peter, the world had narrowed to the space between them. The gentle brush of fingers, the warmth of their shared gaze, the quiet understanding that this was more than a ceremony. It was the celebration of survival, of trust regained, and love affirmed. Later, in the reception area, subtle symbols of their journey adorned the space. The gift of the fountain pen, now displayed elegantly, reminded them of trust and intimacy. Simple floral arrangements echoed the serenity and purity of their connection. A small river-like water feature mirrored the flow of their shared experiences, twists, turbulence, and ultimately, calm and continuity. Conversations flowed naturally, stories were exchanged, and the energy was infused with both relief and joy. Every glance between Elena and Peter carried layers of meaning, a silent recognition of all they had endured. And in moments alone, they found quiet corners to share fleeting touches, whispered words, and lingering eye contact, the intimacy of proximity unforced yet profound. As night fell, Lanterns glimmered like stars along the garden paths, reflecting in the river and casting a golden glow over the scene. Peter and Elena stood at the edge of the water, fingers intertwined, gazing at their reflections. "You know," Elena said softly, "all of this, the danger, the confrontation, the investigations, it feels almost unreal now. But it made this moment perfect." Peter nodded, his hand brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Every risk, every challenge, it was worth it," he murmured. "Because we found truth, trust, in each other. And that is more valuable than anything else." The moment stretched, timeless and serene, a quiet celebration of what had been fought for and won. Justice restored, love solidified, and a future unburdened by past deception or fear. As they turned to rejoin their guests, the river shimmering beside them, Elena and Peter knew that their story had achieved its ultimate resolution. Love and justice could coexist, not as fragile ideals, but as lived realities, forged in fire, sustained through trust, and celebrated in the quiet, profound joy of shared life. And in that shared glance, that gentle touch, that smile exchanged amid the lantern-lit reflections, they understood the ultimate truth, that the greatest victories are those of courage, integrity, and love, together, unshakable and enduring. Thank you for listening to the story. Write your thoughts in the comments.